She was the peace offering, a pawn traded by the man she loved to appease a monstrous king and prevent a bloody pack war. They threw her to the wolves expecting her to be devoured, but they never imagined the ruthless Alpha King would crown her his ruling queen. The stone walls of Harrington Keep were usually a comfort to Isolde Montgomery, but tonight the damp chill seemed to seep directly into her bones. She stood before the gilded mirror in her chambers, the heavy velvet of her midnight blue gown trailing across the rush-covered floor. She was a daughter of House Montgomery of Aylesbury, an ancient bloodline renowned for producing the finest strategists and fiercest warriors in the Eastern Territories. Tomorrow, she was to marry Lord Cedric Harrington, cementing an alliance that had been negotiated since they were children playing with wooden swords in the courtyard. Isolde touched the silver pendant resting at her collarbone, a gift Cedric had given her upon his ascension to Alpha of the Harrington Pack 3 years ago. She loved him, or at least she loved the man she believed him to be honorable, steadfast, and dedicated to the prosperity of their people. The heavy oak door creaked open, breaking the silence. Isolde turned a warm smile, gracing her lips, expecting to see her betrothed sneaking in to steal a moment before their wedding day. It was Cedric indeed, but the smile died on her lips the moment she took in his appearance. He was fully armored, his chainmail glinting in the hearth light, and his expression was as hard as the winter frost clinging to the keep's windows. Behind him stood 2 of his most loyal elite guards, their hands resting cautiously on the hilts of their broadswords. "Cedric," Isolde asked, her voice faltering as she noticed the cold, calculating look in his amber eyes. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you in armor?" Cedric didn't close the distance between them. He stood rigid, his jaw tight. "King Valerian Sterling has crossed the Blood River. The Ironhold Pack is marching on our borders." Isolde's breath hitched. King Valerian of Ironhold was a name used to frighten pups into obedience. He was known as the Ruthless King, an alpha of immense, terrifying power who had conquered the entire northern expanse through sheer brutality and unmatched tactical genius. To have Ironhold marching on Harrington lands meant total annihilation. "Then we must summon the banners," Isolde said immediately, her Montgomery blood running hot with strategic instinct. "If we fortify the narrow pass at Aylesbury, we can bottleneck his forces. We have the high ground. There will be no war, Isolde." Cedric interrupted his voice, devoid of emotion. "I have negotiated a peace." Relief washed over her for a fleeting second, quickly replaced by a creeping dread. Cedric was a proud alpha. He did not negotiate with tyrants unless forced, and he certainly did not surrender without a heavy cost. "At what price?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Cedric finally averted his gaze, looking toward the hearth. "King Valerian demanded a tribute, a sign of our absolute submission and loyalty. He demanded a bride of noble blood to be delivered to his citadel by the next full moon." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Isolde stared at the man she was supposed to marry in less than 12 hours. "A bride," she repeated slowly. "And you agreed." "I had to think of the pack, Isolde," Cedric said, his tone defensive now. "Thousands would die. The Harrington line would be extinguished. Valerian is a monster, but he honors his treaties. If I give him what he wants, he will spare our lands." "And who?" Isolde asked, her chest tightening so painfully she could barely draw breath. "Is this sacrifice?" Before Cedric could answer, a shadow moved in the corridor. A woman stepped into the flickering torchlight of Isolde's chambers. It was Lady Lysandra Croft, daughter of a minor bannerman, draped in silks, and radiating a smug, triumphant aura. She walked directly to Cedric's side, and to Isolde's horror, Cedric reached out his hand, settling possessively on Lysandra's waist. "I am sorry, Isolde." Cedric lied, his voice steadying as he pulled Lysandra closer. The moon goddess works in mysterious ways. 3 days ago, during the hunting festival, Lysandra and we realized we are fated mates. I cannot marry you. I cannot bind my soul to another when my mate stands before me. The room seemed to spin. The betrayal struck her not as a single blow, but as 1,000 tiny daggers. Cedric was not sending her away just to save the pack. He was using the threat of King Valerian to conveniently dispose of his political betrothal, clearing the path to marry his new lover without facing the wrath of Isolde's remaining Montgomery loyalists. "You coward!" Isolde hissed the sorrow instantly, transmuting into a blazing white-hot fury. She ripped the silver pendant from her neck, the chain snapping against her skin, and threw it at Cedric's boots. "You dress it up as a noble sacrifice for the pack, but you are trading me to a butcher so you can warm your bed with a minor lord's daughter without political consequence." Lysandra sneered, stepping forward. "Watch your tongue, Isolde. You are speaking to your alpha. I am speaking to a weakling." Isolde fired back, standing tall, her posture regal and unyielding. She looked Cedric dead in the eye. "My ancestors bled to secure these lands. The Montgomery name built the foundation of your power, and you toss me to the wolves to save your own skin. It is done, Isolde." Cedric snapped, his guilt manifesting as anger. "The carriage is waiting in the courtyard. You leave for Ironhold tonight. Escorts will take you to the border, and Valerian's men will receive you. Do not make this harder than it has to be." "Harder for whom, Cedric?" she asked coldly. She turned her back on him, refusing to let him see the single tear that betrayed her composure. "Get out of my chambers. I will pack my own things. I need no help from traitors." An hour later, under the cover of a starless, freezing night, Isolde was escorted into the snow-covered courtyard. She wore no Harrington colours, only the dark, muted greys and blacks of a woman going into mourning. As she climbed into the unheated carriage, she did not look back at the stone keep she had called home. She did not weep. She was Isolde Montgomery, and though she was being sent to a beast's lair to die, she silently vowed that if she was to burn in Ironhold, she would make sure to take some of the fire for herself. The journey north through the Frostfang Pass was a grueling exercise in misery. For 10 days the carriage rattled over treacherous, ice-slicked mountain roads. When Cedric's guards finally handed her over at the border, King Valerian's elite warriors, massive silent men, clad in black steel and direwolf pelts, treated her not as a noble bride, but as a prisoner of war. They spoke no words to her, only riding relentlessly through the blinding snowstorms until the jagged, imposing spires of Ironhold Citadel pierced the grey horizon. Ironhold was not a palace, it was a fortress bred for war. Carved directly into the side of a colossal mountain, its dark stone walls bristled with iron spikes and armed sentries. The air here was heavy with the scent of pine wood smoke and the overwhelming primal aura of apex predators. Isolde was escorted through the colossal iron gates, her boots crunching against the frost-covered stones of the courtyard. She was exhausted, freezing, and running on nothing but pure, unadulterated spite. The guards led her up a dizzying number of winding stone stairs deeper and higher into the citadel, until they reached a set of massive obsidian doors. The doors groaned open, revealing the great hall. It was a cavernous space lit by massive roaring hearths that cast long dancing shadows across banners bearing the silver wolf of the Stirling dynasty. And there, seated upon a throne forged from the salvaged weapons of his vanquished enemies, was King Valerian Stirling. He was nothing like the exaggerated tales spun by terrified Southerners, yet he was infinitely more dangerous. He was not a mindless brute foaming at the mouth. Valerian was breathtakingly imposing, with broad shoulders and a physique carved from years of relentless warfare. His raven-black hair was cropped close on the sides, and a jagged silver scar slashed across his left cheek, disappearing into his jawline. But it was his eyes that struck fear into Isolde. They were a striking, piercing, icy blue that seemed to strip away her armor and look directly into her soul. "Leave us," Valerian commanded, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that sent a physical vibration through the stone floor. The guards immediately bowed and retreated, pulling the heavy obsidian door shut behind them. The echo of the closing doors sounded entirely too much like the ceiling of a tomb. Isolde stood perfectly still in the center of the hall, refusing to lower her gaze, refusing to bow. If he was going to kill her, she would look him in the eye when he did it. Valerian stood slowly moving with the terrifying fluid grace of a stalking predator. He descended the steps of the dais, his heavy boots making slow, deliberate sounds against the stone. He circled her once, assessing her, as one might assess a fine, deadly blade. "Isolde of House Montgomery." Valerian finally spoke, stopping right in front of her. He was easily a foot taller, forcing her to tilt her chin up to maintain eye contact. "You do not tremble. Most southern lords wet themselves when they stand where you are standing." "I am out of tears and out of patience, your grace." Isolde replied, her voice remarkably steady, despite the racing of her heart. "If you intend to slaughter me as a message to my former alpha, I only ask that you make it quick." A low, dark chuckle rumbled in Valerian's chest. The sound was surprising, devoid of madness, filled instead with dry amusement. "Kill you? Why would I destroy the very thing I went to such great lengths to acquire?" Isolde frowned, confusion breaking through her stoic mask. "Acquire Cedric Harrington, traded me to you to save his own skin." "Lord Cedric," Valerian said, the name dripping with disdain, "is a fool who thinks with his ego and his loins. He believes he outsmarted me by sending away a betrothed he no longer wanted, so he could mate with his new paramour." Valerian leaned in closer, bringing with him the intoxicating scent of winter frost and cedar. "But Cedric did not choose you as my tribute, Isolde. I demanded you by name." Isolde's eyes widened. You asked for me, why?" Valerian turned and walked toward a massive oak table situated near the hearth. It was covered in maps, carved wooden markers, and scattered correspondence. "The Harrington pack is weak. I could crush them in an afternoon. But ruling a vast kingdom requires more than brute force. It requires minds that understand strategy, logistics, and warfare. The Montgomery bloodline is legendary for producing the finest military minds in our history." He looked over his shoulder at her, his icy eyes blazing with intense purpose. "I do not need a fragile weeping bride to bear my pups and sit quietly in a tower. I need a queen who can govern a war council. I need an equal. My spies reported that you were the true architect behind the Harrington pack's recent prosperity. Cedric took the credit, but it was your mind, Isolde." Isolde stepped forward, her shock morphing into a sharp, thrilling curiosity. "You marched an army to the Blood River, just to extricate me from my betrothal." "I gave Cedric a choice," Valerian corrected smoothly. "Give me the Montgomery heir, or lose his kingdom. He proved his incompetence by thinking he was discarding a useless pawn. He handed me his most valuable piece." Valerian gestured to the maps on the table. "Come here." Hesitantly, Isolde approached the war table. She looked down and immediately recognized the topography of the northern crags and the disputed borders near the Whispering Woods. "My generals are proposing a frontal assault on the rebel encampments in the valley here," Valerian said, pointing to a clustered group of red markers. "Tell me what you see." Isolde looked at the map, her strategic mind automatically engaging temporarily, forgetting the terror of the man beside her. She studied the terrain, the river currents, and the marked elevations. "It's a trap," she said, bluntly, pointing to a narrow ravine just above the valley. "If you march your vanguard into the valley, the rebels will trigger an avalanche from the eastern ridge, cutting off your retreat. Your men will be slaughtered before they even draw their swords." She picked up the red markers and moved them to the high ground along the western ridge. You flank them here, under the cover of night. You cut off their supply line from the river. They will starve in a week and surrender without you losing a single wolf." Silence fell over the great hall. Valerian stared at the map, then slowly looked up at Isolde. The dangerous, icy distance in his eyes had been replaced by a burning, unmistakable admiration. "Just as I calculated," Valerian murmured, his gaze dropping momentarily to her lips before meeting her eyes again. "But my generals took 3 days to argue over it. You saw it in 3 seconds." He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his imposing presence wrapping around her like a heavy protective cloak. "You were traded by a coward, Isolde. But in Ironhold, we do not waste brilliance. You will not be a captive here. You will sit at my right hand, and if you prove you possess the iron necessary to rule this brutal land, you will be my queen." Isolde looked up at the ruthless Alpha King, realizing that the stories were wrong. He wasn't a mindless beast. He was a visionary, and for the first time in her life, she was truly seen. The transition from a sacrificed southern prisoner to the most trusted advisor in the ruthless Alpha King's court was not a seamless endeavor. The northern lords of Ironhold were exceptionally proud, battle-hardened veterans who looked upon a southern noblewoman with barely concealed disdain and suspicion. During her very first war council in the shadowy obsidian chamber, the tension was so thick it could be cut with a broadsword. General Harrison, a heavily scarred veteran who had fought loyally by Valerian's side for over a decade, slammed his heavy, gauntleted fist against the ancient oak table. "You expect us to take orders from a Montgomery?" Harrison roared, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Her people cower behind fortified stone walls, while we bleed in the relentless snow. She knows absolutely nothing of northern warfare, Your Grace. This is madness." Valerian's icy blue eyes narrowed dangerously, a low, threatening growl rumbling deep within his chest. But before the Alpha King could reprimand his insubordinate general, Isolde stepped forward. Her midnight blue velvet gown swept gracefully across the floor, and she did not flinch under the veteran's hostile glare. "I know that your western flank has suffered devastating casualties, because you stubbornly march them straight through the Howling Pass." Isolde stated, her voice slicing through the heavy air like a perfectly sharpened silver blade. "You rely entirely on brute force and intimidation, General. But the winter snows are deep, your supply lines are stretched dangerously thin, and you are losing men to frostbite before they even see a battle. If you reroute the heavy infantry through the lowlands of Oakhaven, employing the ancient flanking strategies detailed in the lost texts of General Hannibal, you will cut your march time by 3 entire days and bypass the rebel outposts completely. It is not cowardice. It is basic strategic logistics." The war room fell completely dead silent. Harrison scowled fiercely, looking down at the scattered map markers, slowly realizing the undeniable tactical truth embedded in her bold words. Valerian leaned back in his massive carved throne, a ghost of a proud, highly dangerous smile playing on his lips. "The lady speaks undeniable wisdom." Valerian finally declared, his deep voice leaving absolutely no room for further argument. "We execute the Oakhaven maneuver at first light." Over the following month, Isolde proved her sheer brilliance time and time again. She meticulously streamlined the Citadel's defensive perimeters, organized the strict winter rationing systems, and completely restructured the patrol routes, using defensive formations she had learned from the ancient texts of Clausewitz. The wolves of Ironhold slowly began to revere her, shifting their perspective from begrudging tolerance to absolute unwavering devotion. As her profound influence over the pack grew, so did the intense unspoken bond between Isolde and Valerian. Their late-night strategy sessions by the roaring hearth often drifted effortlessly into hours of quiet, deeply personal conversation. She learned that the ruthless king was a man heavily burdened by the immense weight of a completely fractured kingdom, striving tirelessly to build a prosperous future where his people did not have to survive on constant mindless bloodshed. One evening, as a fierce howling blizzard raged outside the citadel's towering stained-glass windows, Valerian stood exceptionally close to her, tracing the jagged edge of the Western war map. "You have completely transformed my court, Isolde," he murmured, his usually icy blue eyes softening significantly as they met hers. "I merely offered them a different perspective, Valerian," she replied softly, her heart fluttering wildly at his overwhelming proximity. The beastly king reached out his calloused, battle-scarred fingers, gently brushing a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. The simple touch sent a massive jolt of electricity racing down her spine, a stark, painful contrast to the cold indifference Cedric had always shown her. "You are vastly more than a tactician," Valerian said, his voice a husky, magnetic whisper. "You are the very heart this frozen fortress desperately needed." But their fragile, beautiful peace was violently shattered the very next morning when a bloodied scout rode frantically into the snowy courtyard, collapsing instantly from his grievous wounds. Isolde and Valerian rushed immediately to the lower bailey. The scout, gasping painfully for breath, delivered a horrifying message. "Ambush! In the Whispering Woods. Lord Maxwell's entire patrol battalion slaughtered." Isolde's blood ran completely cold. The Whispering Woods was a highly classified patrol route known exclusively to the Inner Council. Someone had deliberately leaked their private movements. Valerian's roar of pure, unadulterated fury shook the very foundations of the massive stone citadel. "We have a rat hiding in our ranks," he snarled viciously, his sharp fangs elongating as his inner wolf violently surfaced. Isolde's strategic mind raced at lightning speed. "Cedric," she whispered, absolute realization dawning on her. "Cedric knows my tactical patterns. He is coordinating directly with the northern rebels." Valerian turned to her, his eyes blazing with a lethal, terrifying promise. "Your cowardly former betrothed dares to strike at my pack." Isolde nodded solemnly, her expression hardening instantly into a mask of pure, unbreakable steel. He finally realized he foolishly gave away his greatest strategic asset. His new mate, Lysandra, has absolutely no mind for governance, and the Southern Lords are already threatening a massive rebellion against him. He needs me back, not out of love, but out of desperate political survival. He secretly allied with the northern rebels to maliciously destabilize Ironhold and force you into a corner where I am returned in a treaty. Valerian's resulting laugh was a terrifying guttural sound, completely devoid of any humor. "He will find nothing but agonizing death," the Alpha King swore. However, the betrayal ran much deeper than they originally anticipated. Lord Maxwell himself was the treacherous traitor, having deceitfully sold the classified patrol routes directly to Cedric in exchange for heavy chests of southern gold. That very night, Maxwell initiated a violent coup, stealthily unlocking the eastern postern gate to secretly let a heavily armed strike force of rebel mercenaries directly into the lower levels of Ironhold Citadel. The blaring alarms rang loudly in the dead of night, and the deafening clash of steel echoed through the ancient stone corridors. Valerian commanded Isolde to remain safely hidden in the high tower, but she staunchly refused to be a helpless bystander while her beloved new home was under attack. Armed with a beautifully balanced short sword Valerian had personally gifted her, Isolde bravely descended into the bloody fray. The lower bailey was a scene of sheer, unrelenting chaos. Roaring fires illuminated the falling snow as dedicated Ironhold warriors clashed violently with the treacherous infiltrators. Through the thick, acrid smoke, Isolde saw Valerian fighting fiercely like a vengeful demon ripped straight from the underworld. He tore through the enemy ranks with devastating efficiency. But then she spotted the traitorous Lord Maxwell, lurking cowardly in the dark shadows of the armory, carefully aiming a heavy modified crossbow smeared with highly toxic wolfsbane poison directly at Valerian's fully exposed back. "Valerian," Isolde screamed at the top of her lungs, sprinting desperately across the bloody courtyard without a single thought for her own personal safety. She threw herself violently forward, her shoulder colliding forcefully with Maxwell just then. His treacherous finger quickly pulled the heavy trigger. The heavy iron bolt flew wildly off course, grazing Valerian's broad shoulder instead of burying itself fatally in his beating heart. The Alpha King spun around aggressively, his icy eyes locking instantly onto the cowardly traitor. With a truly feral loud snarl, Valerian rapidly crossed the distance in a sheer blur of motion, effortlessly disarming Maxwell and slamming him brutally against the rough stone wall. But the highly concentrated wolfsbane on the bolt, even from a mere graze, was incredibly potent and acted fast. Valerian stumbled awkwardly, his immense supernatural strength faltering. The dark, burning poison flooded relentlessly into his veins. He fell heavily to one knee, breathing erratically, temporarily incapacitated. The shocking sight of the invincible Alpha King falling sent a massive ripple of panic directly through the Ironhold defenders. The emboldened rebel mercenaries aggressively pressed their sudden advantage, pushing the defending northern wolves back dangerously toward the inner keep. General Harrison frantically shouted defensive orders, but the defensive line was rapidly crumbling under the overwhelming pressure. Isolde knew intrinsically that if they lost their momentum right now, the legendary citadel would fall entirely, and Cedric would wrongfully claim unearned victory. She stepped bravely in front of Valerian, raising her bloodied sword high into the freezing air. "Ironhold, hold the line," her powerful voice rang out, impressively magically amplified by the unique acoustics of the stone courtyard. "Your Alpha King still breathes. Do absolutely not let these pathetic southern cowards desecrate your sacred home." Her fierce, completely unwavering presence, squarely in the face of imminent death, acted as a powerful, undeniable beacon. The seasoned Ironhold warriors, deeply inspired by the brave southern lady, who stood fearlessly guarding their violently fallen Alpha, rallied instantly with a truly deafening, united, fierce war cry. Isolde absolutely didn't stop there. She quickly scanned the chaotic battlefield, her legendary Montgomery instincts taking total control. Harrison flanked them aggressively from the armory stairs. Archers ignite the defensive oil trenches by the main gate immediately. The overly confident mercenaries had pushed much too far into the central courtyard, entirely neglecting their vulnerable rear guard. As Harrison flawlessly executed the flanking maneuver and the massive fire roared blindingly to life, the enemy forces were cleanly and expertly boxed into a fatal, inescapable choke point. The resulting battle quickly turned into an absolute slaughter as the mercenaries completely fell. Within mere minutes, the severely outmaneuvered mercenaries completely dropped their weapons, falling instantly to their knees in absolute begging surrender. The courtyard grew incredibly quiet, save for the crackling fires and the painful groans of the wounded. Isolde immediately dropped her sword and knelt carefully beside Valerian. He was extremely pale, sweating profusely from the toxic wolfsbane, but his striking eyes were fixed securely on her, with intense, burning, undeniable pride. "You brilliantly saved my pack," he rasped softly, his heavy hand reaching up slowly to touch her soot-stained cheek. "I will be completely fine," she whispered softly back. "Get the chief healer immediately, and forcefully drag that pathetic traitor into the deepest dungeon." Isolde aggressively commanded the surviving guards, taking absolute, unquestioned control of the chaotic aftermath. 2 days later, Valerian was fully recovering in his opulent chambers, the dangerous poison completely purged from his resilient system. The citadel was heavily secured, and Lord Maxwell was locked away. But the conflict was not entirely over. Urgent word suddenly arrived that Cedric, utterly furious over the total failure of his treacherous coup, had aggressively marched his own elite guard directly to the northern border, arrogantly demanding a formal audience. He foolishly believed Valerian was dead, and he confidently came to proudly claim Isolde. He sent an arrogant, threatening missive promising a swift invasion if his rightful mate was not surrendered immediately. Isolde carefully read the demanding scroll, her lips curling into a cold smile. "Let the coward come," she told Harrison confidently. "But we will not meet him at the open border. We will meet him at the Howling Pass." She quickly devised a masterstroke of tactical deception. She purposefully marched a highly vulnerable detachment of guards directly to the pass, acting convincingly as if they were desperately fleeing. Cedric, heavily blinded by toxic arrogance and a frantic need to reclaim his political asset, aggressively ordered his eager men directly into the narrow, icy gorge, ignoring basic rules of military engagement. He fully expected to slaughter a completely broken pack. What he actually found was the overwhelming military might of Ironhold, waiting silently in the towering cliffs above. Cedric, completely humiliated and utterly defeated, quietly ordered the shameful retreat, forever losing his brilliant asset. That very night, within the Great Hall, King Valerian officially crowned Isolde. She was proudly the undisputed, fiercely beloved, ruling queen of Ironhold, reigning forever. Did Isolde make the right choice, trusting the ruthless Alpha King, or is there a darker secret waiting in Ironhold? The real war for the throne has only just begun. If you want to see how this dramatic werewolf romance unfolds, hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the thrilling next parts.